Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company and the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber and my co-host.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning.
We are streaming on a number of platforms this morning, and you may be curious about the picture behind us. As you know, part of our tradition here is years of photography have given me a number of wonderful images to share, and this particular one is a nursing home in northern Italy. It is a region that used to belong to Austria, and the mountains, the Tyrolean mountains, and this is near Merano, Italy. Actually, it is Merano, and down below the bed and breakfast that we usually stay at. We're in the Alps here, mind you, so there's a lot of elevation change here. Is this wonderful ancient building that was converted into a nursing home where people go to finish off the rest of their lives. And it is set in a vineyard and apple orchards, and the views are just spectacular. The picture here doesn't do it justice, but we're in a valley, and the picture is actually taken from the side of a mountain. My connection to this picture is, wouldn't this be a wonderful place to finish off your days on Earth? You could walk every day and enjoy the Alps and the fresh air and all of the fruit that's growing around you. So, Merano, Italy, nursing home. We have a number of things to cover today with you, and we're going to be a little bit slower on questions, but it's because we're short on staffs, but continue to ask them. Tell us where you're from. We always like to see what part of the world that people are coming in from, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions. We've got a new prop here today. This is the new Tesla shot glass, apparently, and it was a Christmas gift. So we'll have that out here with our Franz von Holzhausen signed new Tesla Roadster model, and it'll become part of our props here. One of the first things that I had to cover with you guys was apparently people have been complaining that the new Tesla FOBs coming with the Model 3 and the Model Y don't have a battery in them. And, you know, the complaint was, come on, doesn't Tesla have enough money to spend a few pennies on a battery for these key fobs? You know, it's not about saving money in this case. I think the reason they're doing this is because the batteries deteriorate, and they want to make sure that you have a fresh one. Now, if they get wind of this complaint, they'll probably be giving you free batteries with every key fob. They're very inexpensive, but so that's what's going on with the key fobs. We have a question from TikTok, and it looks like Moang Mojika Jr. What have your techs done to improve reliability and make self-sustaining charging Tesla? Well, you know, the type of work that we do is out of warranty work. And although we get a fair share of opportunity to improve on design, especially with the Tesla Roadster, which was really a prototype that was pushed in the field a bit before it was ready, we find a lot of areas of improvement, and we typically do that. Even with the Model S, there was one in last week. We took out a battery, the main battery pack.
That's right.
And it had some water damage on top. And again, it was one of those cases where the condensate tubing that comes off the HVAC unit to cool the car collects, of course, water, and the hose had not yet been rerouted so that it doesn't drip on top of the main battery pack. So that was one of the first things that we did once we had the battery out. We extended that hose, and it now drips off to the front and the side of the car rather than on top of the battery pack.
And when we find things like this that happen to the Teslas or happen to the Roadsters or the Model S's, oftentimes we'll go back to Tesla. We'll put together a tech bulletin and talk to our customers about that. We'll also make sure that we share that with the Tesla engineers. That way they have a chance to work with us and us with them to make things more reliable in the future.
Which is a wonderful thing because it creates a true partnership.
Absolutely.
What, in some industries could be considered competitors, which is kind of silly in today's day and age, especially when you have a company where the demand for product far outweighs your ability to ever supply. So what's the concern about a competitor? If anything, they're helping you take care of customers and keep the heat off of you.
Exactly.
All right. Looks like we have another TikTok question. It's from user 14754. Thoughts on Elon Musk ruining Tesla's future with his tweets? Well, what about your thoughts, Mark?
I know that Elon Musk is a mercurial leader, and a lot of the tweets are not taken very well by the investors and people that are working with, that hold Tesla stock. Yet Tesla itself is talking about growth that's unprecedented in the industry. For example, we're going to get into how Tesla is projecting 50% growth this year. And this in an auto market where the other automakers are simply trying to hold their own most of the time. Tesla's got about, if they make their 50% mark, about 1.5 million units that are going to be delivered this year. Just by way of comparison, Tesla has 4 models, GM has over 20 models, and Ford has over 20 models. Ford is going to deliver about 1.9 million vehicles this year, and GM is going to deliver about 2.3 million. So that means Tesla is right up with the big boys in terms of their deliveries now. And yet they're doing it with only four car models, where these others are doing with over 20.
That's fascinating, yeah. With only 4 car models. Just think when they get to a number of different models, including the Semi and the Cybertruck, and whatever else they're going to add to that list of brands.
Oh, by all means, they have a chance of becoming one of the largest, if not the largest, auto manufacturer in the world.
My personal thoughts on Elon are he's of course a visionary, and what I find refreshing with him is he doesn't spend too much time trying to be politically correct. Now that frustrates a lot of people, but he usually speaks what's on his mind, and that's pretty genuine. Now, does it create some ripples in the market? Oh, absolutely. Does it irritate people? Totally. You can't avoid that. So I don't think we're at a point where it's beginning to create enormous amounts of damage, though. So at this point, I think we have to let Elon just simply continue doing what he's doing.
I think so. It looks like 42 Braun 42 asked a question as well. Can a Tesla main battery freeze if it's not in use over a winter? The lithium-ion, multi-cell lithium-ion battery packs don't like extremely cold weather. But there are heating methods or there is thermal management in these packs. If it's not used over a winter, no, there are enough controls in that battery that it will not allow it to actually damage the battery. It's not a widely known thing that electric vehicles have a coolant system with basically it's like radiator fluid that an ICE vehicle has as well. And just like the ICE vehicles, that coolant is designed to be able to withstand temperatures 40 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or even colder.
Yeah, it's a closed loop glycol based system that uses electric pumps. All right. We've got our first glasses question from TikTok. Jose, what's up with the glasses? Well, for those of you unfamiliar with our theme, we always wear sunglasses for these podcasts.
That's right.
And it is a huge mystery as to why. But we're saving the best for last, which is we're going to do a video that eventually exposes why there are always sunglasses involved in the majority of Gruber Motors Company production, from videos to podcasts. And it's probably worth hanging around for because you'll all be surprised.
Now, Pete, Hot Rails Rose asks if there's any news on the next-gen Roadster.
No news that we're aware of. It's definitely in play. You know, Tesla does tend to at times overcommit and underdeliver, and that's probably one of those categories. But remember that the revenue-generating portions of the company are being well taken care of at this point, including the next huge gold rush, which they feel is going to be the Cybertruck. And later on, we'll talk about that a bit more, but the Cybertruck does have a scheduled release date going into 2023 at this point.
Yes.
So it looks like we have greetings from Estonia. Thank you. That's part of Europe, Eastern Europe. I have one question about electric car battery management. This is from Mart on YouTube. Is active really needed? I have a 2012 Nissan Leaf and it runs just fine on its original battery after 200,000 kilometers.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what that meant. That is active really needed? I'm assuming that's active management for the battery running all the time. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
You know, it's possible that it could mean, Jesse, that the car batteries a lot of times will be recommended that you don't charge them above 80% of capacity or things like that. And if you charge a battery repeatedly, top charge it and fully discharge it, could potentially reduce the lifespan on those batteries.
If we're not answering your question, Mart, feel free to elaborate a bit and we'll give it another shot. Greetings from Estonia.
Thanks. You know, one thing that I do take care of with the EV cars that I have, I do go ahead and follow that advice though. I'll take my Model S battery and limit it to a 90% charge and my Volvo battery to an 80% charge. I do feel that it is something that makes an impact on the lifespan of the battery.
Yeah, Mark actually has been, or is an owner of 3 EV vehicles. That started all with the Kia that we purchased from one of the test labs here in town.
That's right.
Kia Soul EV?
The Kia Soul EV was a great little car. There were some software issues with the Kia Soul back in 2015. It ate through its battery the first time in about 20,000 miles. Replaced it under warranty, and the battery was going strong at the time that we traded it in for the Volvo just a couple months ago.
Okay. And he's been driving a Tesla Model S for many years now.
That's right.
Very familiar with that. And yeah, I'd like to get your ideas on the Volvo here in a while. We actually stopped at Fashion Square this weekend, my wife and I, and the Polestar store looks pretty Spartan. It's minimalistic. But I was able to get some posters which we put up in our
oh, that's great. And Polestar seems to be making a great electric vehicle as well.
Yeah.
There sure are an awful lot of manufacturers that have come to the party now.
We'll talk about that later too. I've got some information on that. California passed a bill, apparently, and they were claiming that Tesla's FSD is false advertising. Now, FSD, of course, stands for full self-driving. So as the name implies, it's not quite full self-driving. So they probably have a point. But what they're saying is that, and this is the basis for this new legislation that the governor passed, a manufacturer or dealer shall not name any partial driving automation feature or describe any partial driving automation feature in marketing materials using language that implies or would otherwise lead a reasonable person to believe that the feature allows the vehicle to function as an autonomous vehicle, as defined in section blah, 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 or otherwise has functionality not actually included in the feature. A violation of the subdivision shall be considered misleading advertising for the purpose of this particular legislation. So,
you know, when Elon first advertised full self-driving, it was a $3,000 add-on for people to buy. And he advertised it at the time that we don't have it yet, but if you want to get it and get it early, then we're going to give you a big discount. Now the full self-driving feature, as it's announced, is close to $10,000 as an add-on for the car. Yet, even still, it's only in beta mode, and Elon Musk says this is not something that a driver can be inattentive with. Since it's in beta, the car might do the absolutely worst thing at the worst possible time, and it's up to you as a driver to be aware. In spite of that, this type of law took place. I think it was, what, about a week ago even, that we heard in the news that there was an accident that the driver's blaming on full self-driving up in San Francisco, a rear-end type of accident where the Tesla suddenly slowed down to 0 miles an hour on the expressway.
So the mechanisms for updating and making this fully self-driving exist in that they're able to do over-the-air updates to the car once this feature is installed or it's been paid for. And as they say, as these self-driving capabilities are introduced, your car will be continuously upgraded through the over-the-air or OTA software updates.
Yeah. You know, we have another couple of questions here. From Secure Folder on YouTube, why aren't you using a Van de Graaff generator to self-charge your batteries all at the same time?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Secure Folder from YouTube. As a kid, I got very few toys, but one of them was my mother got me a Van de Graaff generator. And it was a little device about this tall. It had a plastic chromed gold or a globe on top. And there was a pulley system with a large rubber band that essentially you would crank with thimbles that were had wool stretched on them. And of course the rubber rubbing against the wool created static electricity, which was then bled off with a little feeler on this globe. I could never figure out why sometimes the thing would work great and other times it just didn't work worth a darn until I learned about humidity levels.
Oh, sure.
I lived in Rochester, New York, and when it was raining outside, this thing did absolutely nothing. But you got a nice dry day and suddenly, you know, you got some sparks. I like this thing so much, I actually ended up taking a motor out of a furnace assembly that someone had thrown away. I used to dig through the trash up and down the street on Monday mornings when before the trashmen came. And I got this little AC motor, and I coupled that to the little crank down below so that it was actually now automated. And my spark grew tremendously, got much, much larger.
Oh, goodness.
But anyway, so the question was, why don't they use this to charge batteries? The amount of current that's available from a static charge is minuscule, and it would be very difficult to get enough energy and then of course store it on top of that in order to have any sort of meaningful impact on a car or some propulsion device.
You know, my favorite memory with a Van de Graaff generator, I actually have, remember them in our physics class. We would take, one person would hold one of the little balls that had the static electricity buildup, and then they would hold hands with 3 or 4 people. While one person turned, you would go across the room and you'd shock somebody who was not aware that it was going to be happening. Yes.
Which again reinforces the notion, why can birds sit on a high tension power line that has 1.2 million volts on it without getting electrocuted? Because they're not completing the circuit.
Exactly.
So when those people finally touched someone and completed a circuit, that's when you got your spark. Cool. Fascinating technology. And by the way, things like Van de Graaff generators, I mean, this stuff happened over 100 years ago. And like any new discovery, we observe the phenomena and later on find applications for it.
Yeah.
Looks like Instagram, the Philly juicer. How big is Tesla's competitive advantage over other car companies? It is gargantuan. I don't know how else to describe it. They, you have to remember that Tesla was persistent when all the other manufacturers thought that this was a joke. It was unrealistic, there was no market. Remember, GM with the EV1 decided we're going to crush all these cars in the 90s because there's no market for electric cars. So the lead that Tesla was able to gain by leaving all of the other manufacturers asleep was just enormous. And today, the majority of technology is copying Tesla's original designs, going all the way back to the Roadster with the multi-cell 18650 cell packs. So having said that, though, Tesla is not the type of competitor that does not share, which is a good thing because that's probably one of the reasons that we have such a active EV adoption rate going on at this point. And the other manufacturers are now clearly awake, eyes wide open. They realize that they had missed the opportunity, and they're scrambling to catch up.
By all means. I'm gonna go down to the TikTok MP 2021. Who's the gentleman in the blue shirt?
Let's reintroduce.
Oh, my name is Mark Schaffner. I'm actually the CFO of the Gruber Companies, and I've worked here for nearly 9 years, even longer than Gruber Motors has been in existence.
Yeah, right.
However, I'm very much an EV enthusiast, and I do help out on occasion in the technical side on the Gruber Motor team, doing things such as working with the software for the Roadsters and for the Model S's.
Mark's background actually originally was a software consultant for our company and then joined us as CFO 9 years ago. And he's still actively involved in all of our software needs. So yeah, when it comes to Model S's needing firmware redeployed and working in CAN signals and trying to figure out what Linux is or isn't doing, that's when Mark and his team comes in.
Absolutely.
Another question, YouTube, Mark, where's the background picture from? It is in Merano, Italy. It is in the Alps. We're we stayed at a bed and breakfast, just an elevation up above this. You can't see the whole picture there, but we're in a valley, and there are fruit trees, apple trees, vineyards, grapes growing everywhere. And this is a nursing home. It is a old facility, a couple 100 years old, and it's been converted into a nursing home. And what I enjoyed so much about it is, if you saw the surroundings here, this is a wonderful place to finish off your journey here on Earth, in a place like this, in the Alps, in a valley, in Merano, Italy. All right. Looks like we've got an Instagram question from 42 Bron. 42, are you guys in the market for Cybertruck? You know, I never did put my down payment. Did you do it?
I have not put a down payment on the Cybertruck yet. It's a very interesting concept, very unique style. I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like when it comes out.
Excellent. One of the Facebook statements from Ryan Moyer, Tesla docs in the house. By the way, Ryan is also a Tesla expert in many ways. He has a wonderful Facebook site, answers a lot of questions, and does a lot of the type of work that we do. So welcome, Ryan, to our show. So Tesla apparently is offering 10,000 free miles of supercharging and a $7,500 discount on Model Y and Model 3 cars delivered until December 31st. And, you know, Tesla always has so don't read too much into this. They always have a huge push end of quarter in order to get vehicles into the hands of owners. It does a number of things. The financials look much better, and they're able to flush out some inventory. And this is one of the ways that they're encouraging people to make a year-end decision rather than wait until next year.
I know this has made some of the investors pretty skittish, thinking that maybe the demand is dropping at Tesla or something like that. We mentioned earlier, though, that the Tesla demand is expected to rise almost 50%. In fact, that's what Tesla had forecasted. And doubling this rebate is actually probably a response to the U.S. Treasury, because earlier this week, the U.S. Treasury announced that the EV rebate, which starts as part of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2023, is going to be in play January 1st. But the rules around that rebate, where you can't build your cars with parts from China, have been delayed until March 1st. So the effect is that somebody who wants a Model 3 or Model Y, which are probably not going to be eligible for that rebate in March, are going to be eligible for the next 2 months if they simply put off their purchase until the first of the year. So I think Tesla's trying to counteract that and pull their purchases that they expected to have at the end of the month back into December where they wanted them to be.
Interesting. Yeah, China, for example, Shanghai is shut down to a degree, and the reason is COVID. Everyone is not reading that correctly, thinking that there's a demand problem. And
that's right.
Again, Tesla is a 50% growth rate this year, I believe, is what they were targeting, and it looks like they're going to make it.
They're pretty close to being able to make it.
Okay. Let's see. None of the... one thing that I wanted to cover in this podcast this morning was some of the history regarding this EV adoption and how it's intensifying and what we observed. We started repairing Tesla Roadsters in 2014, roughly time frame. And of course, back then, there were no EVs on the road other than some Model S's, which had been released in 2012. But none of the EV manufacturers, very few at that time, even thinking about it, were expecting the demand to be anywhere near what it is. Elon did not expect to be the world's richest man and to be able to build factories all over the world at this pace. It just was not at that time in the stars or in anyone's expectation. Today, what's fascinating to me is every month you've got another EV manufacturer entering the field and announcing a vehicle. You have incumbents that have realized that ICE is dead and they need to move into EV space, and they're beginning to develop or announcing EV vehicles. In 2014, as I pointed out here, there were very few EVs on the road other than Tesla. There was the RAV4, which had been around for a while, partnership between Nissan and Tesla. The Chevy Volt, of course, GM. The Mercedes smart car. That was the car that Tesla converted to an electric vehicle. Excuse me. And part of what helped Daimler, or convinced Daimler, to help fund Tesla, to get them out of their near bankruptcy condition at the time. And then, of course, the Tesla Model S. In 2014, we didn't have enough Roadsters to work on, so we used to repair Priuses and other hybrids, and we focused on battery repairs. What intensified, I think, this transition to EVs was the unheard of weight versus horsepower performance in a three-phase AC induction motor. Excuse me, it's that time of year. So for a fraction of the weight, you could have extraordinarily powerful engine with full horsepower and torque at 0 RPM. People weren't used to this in the automotive repair world. If you want to entertain some questions, I'm going to calm down my throat here a bit.
Again, from 42 Braun 42, I have a 2013 Model S. It was hit on the right fender and it has a damaged DC assembly. After I replace it, does it have to be reprogrammed? And if so, how can I go about that? So the right, I am going to assume that you're talking about the right rear fender, which is where the DC charging occurs.
Now, if it's a charger problem underneath the rear seats, then yes, you would. If there's a replacement, there would have to be a firmware redeploy.
Yeah, and that even takes place on the charging port itself. I've actually learned from personal experience where I had to have my charging port replaced on my Model S. A firmware redeploy is probably going to be necessary. The way to go about that is if you're able to get your hands on a copy of Toolbox 3, the firmware redeploy is part of that. It assumes a fairly advanced level of knowledge of how to do that. Otherwise, you're going to need to take that into your Tesla service center in order to have that reprogramming or redeploy done.
Then we have a question from Instagram, the Philly Juicer. Can you talk about your vision for Gruber and for a Gruber Motor Company going forward? Thank you. Well, the vision for Gruber Motor Company has always been to work on electric vehicles and provide an independent repair option from the factories or the manufacturers that are cranking out these EVs. The whole world will eventually have shops like ours.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we happened to notice when we went into the EV space was that we came into it with seemingly like 20 years of experience.
I'm going to go get some water.
Okay. I've talked to a few different people and about this. An electric vehicle is simply a UPS or an uninterruptible power system with a different power output. We've worked on UPSs as part of Gruber Power Services since 2000. And these large three-phase systems that power hotels and hospitals, medical centers, casinos, office buildings, things of that sort, will bring in electricity, either single phase or three-phase alternating current. They'll use they'll use an inverter to then store that electricity into a DC battery bank, and when the power is needed, it comes out of the DC battery bank, gets re-inverted back to an AC power three-phase system or single phase, and goes out to an electrical panel that goes to an office building. An electric vehicle is exactly the same thing, just that the power output, instead of being for a battery bank, that electric output goes to an electric three-phase inductive motor that powers the wheels in your car. So Gruber Motors has extensive experience in this, while we're keeping ourselves busy to the point of being overwhelmed with all the battery work coming in for the Roadster and for the Model S. Model 3s are going to be coming up in a couple of years. We hope to be able to eventually grow in size to where we're taking on battery repairs and independent repairs for all types of vehicles.
You know, part of our prediction is that the incumbent EV manufacturers, besides Tesla, are going to see the same type of demand, of course, for their vehicles that are currently going on for Teslas. Mm-hmm. When you look at their production goals and you look at that demand that's coming down the pike, there is no way we feel that these new manufacturers are going to be able to scale and build their delivery systems quickly enough to meet the demand. And of course, if you're cranking out vehicles, you're going to have warranty issues. You need to be able to service those customers. Who those new EV manufacturers are going to look for support, they're going to outsource to companies like us that already have experience in the EV space. The pickings are slim for them because they can't go to a normal ICE auto shop and convert them overnight to be able to repair or handle their warranty issues or their repairs.
By all means.
So they're going to look for companies like us that have spent time refining and their skills in the existing Tesla EV space. So that is the long-term projection for Gruber Motor Company. There will be a lot of companies like us that that the manufacturers are going to look for, and they're going to start outsourcing service in order to keep up with the demand.
I think that's absolutely the case, especially when you look at, we were talking about the transition of EVs as we got into this topic. BMW, Ford, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mazda, Nissan, Stellantis, which is the company that owns the Dodge Chrysler now, Subaru, Toyota, Volkswagen, Volvo, all of them have committed to at least 50% of all their vehicle fleets being sold as EVs by 2030, according to the U.S. Government mandate. And vehicles such as manufacturers such as Volvo have already committed to be 100% EV. Audi is that way as well, and that doesn't talk anything about the electromechanica that's making Solo or Lucid or Nikola or any of the other plethora of new manufacturers that are coming on the market. It's truly a remarkable time in the automotive industry.
You know, I don't watch much television, but over the weekend, a TV ad came on, and it was a Cadillac ad for their new Lyriq EV. Mm-hmm. And unlike Tesla, which doesn't do any sort of media advertising, the other car manufacturers do. And it was a well put together EV ad. They were using a Jefferson airplane skit and likening the electrification of cars to what's happening with a band like this playing with all of the electronics that they're surrounded by. Extremely well done. So yeah, this is going to be an exciting time as all these incumbent ICE manufacturers are realizing that they've really been missing the boat and they need to jump on the bandwagon quickly. The question is going to be, will they be able to transition, pivot, and survive?
And that is a real question out there. Speaking of questions from TikTok, User, I'm just going to say with a bunch of numbers at the end. The latest software update from Tesla allows you to request a redeploy of software direct from the screen. You don't even need to be in the geofence at a service center to do so.
You know, I was unaware of that, but that is a brilliant idea from Tesla. It probably alleviates a lot of traffic to their service centers, which are pretty busy at this point.
I was not aware of that either, and that will be a real game changer for people that are doing their own car repairs, and it actually takes a little bit of that car repair burden off of the service centers, which are already overwhelmed and overburdened.
Looks like Steve Barry from Facebook. Jeep has 4 XE models. I was unaware of that.
I actually had heard of Jeep being among the models that are going out to EV models. They're part of the Stellantis group, and they have put out some of their first models now in 2023.
That is a fascinating concept, an electric Jeep. 4-wheel drive. Cool. Instagram, again, the Philly Juicer. Do you feel that the service centers and dealers are not going to have the ability to service the new EVs? Yes.
Yeah, Jesse.
And for, well, my camera's not working, but my mic is working. So I also saw a comment this morning that's along these same lines. Somebody went to one of our older videos where we were talking about the 700,000+ mechanics having to adapt, and they were saying that we here at Gruber, who made that video, must be out of touch if we think that mechanics are not going to be able to adapt. So I think we should try and re-answer that question for people that don't understand.
Yeah, fair enough. You know, if we're talking about low-tech auto, yes, any of the existing auto shops are going to be able to pivot. They can do tires, they can do suspension, they can do brakes, you know, they can do cabin issues, and where the problem occurs is once you get into the electronics and the software. Now, granted, the ICE cars have gotten smarter. There is software, there is firmware, there's reprogramming, they have OBD2 sensors, you know. But the point that we were trying to make was those of us in the independent space that don't have the elaborate tools and the huge stock rooms full of parts where we can do module swapping, we have to repair down to component level. So when a DC to DC converter fails in a Tesla Model S, we can't go to the shelf, get another subassembly, plug it in, and that car's on its way. We open up that DC to DC converter. We find that MOSFET that's blown. We find that capacitor that has blown or failed.
Right.
We have to repair right down to the circuit board and component level. That is the type of skill that does not exist in a traditional internal combustion engine shop. Now, if these shops, these ICE shops, are factory supported, they give them large inventory of parts, then they have a shot at replicating what takes place in the factory shops. But we're talking about independent shops that don't have that level of support, that have to do component level troubleshooting, and that's where the biggest problem occurs. It's much easier for somebody a company coming from the electronic repair world to work on these new EVs than for an ICE shop traditionally doing mechanical work, transmission rebuilds, exhaust repairs, you name it, to suddenly launch into working on EVs.
Change is disruptive, and there are going to be some people that are unable to accommodate the change. There are going to be a lot of people who are very bright. I know that there's a lot of bright mechanics out there. Even some of the mechanics that we have working at Gruber Motors have started out as the typical brake and oil line type of guys, and they're beginning to learn the software. The thing is, it's taking time for that transition to occur, and with the pace of adoption of EVs, it's going to be painful.
And we have 780,000 mechanics out there in the United States that need to pivot and transition. And most of them have never seen a diode or a transformer inside a circuit board or used any sort of done any sort of soldering or surface mount component level repairs.
That's right.
That's the point that we're trying to make. And of course, it's we would like it to be otherwise, but unfortunately, that's the reality. Now, what's the long-term solution? I think the manufacturers are going to be forced to make the cars smarter. They're going to have to move AI into the cars. They're going to have to make them self-diagnosing. They're going to have to, make the cars a lot smarter in the troubleshooting or much more involved in the troubleshooting process.
Absolutely. That's already Tesla is taking that direction a little bit, where a mechanic typically may plug an OBD2 sensor into the vehicle and use that sensor as their diagnosis tool. When we go to work on Model S's, the vehicle itself is our diagnosis tool. We plug a laptop into the car, we turn the car into its diagnosis mode, and then we go to the center console and let it tell us what's going on with the car. From there, myself or Nick, our IT guy that works with the cars as well, will then communicate with the mechanics the type of things that need to be done, and that's how we affect a lot of our fixes.
Sure. Someone just posted something, my melt. Thank you, by the way. Tesla is at 113. My God, I never thought it would get that low. He says, buy more. Not financial advice, right? I think the short sellers are having their day now. In order for a short seller to take any profits, guess what? They have to sell stock.
That's right.
And so this is the worst case scenario right now. But if you look at the price of Tesla stock, the amount of production capacity, the market lead that they have, you'll probably be kicking yourself years from now and saying, why didn't I buy it at 113 or wherever it ends up going to? This is the time to buy more. I fully agree.
On YouTube, it says, related to above from my melt, Darren N., how can it not go back up? With the government forcing the retirement of ICE cars, it has to go back up. Darren, I think you make a fantastic point. The United States is actually, in the worldwide market, kind of behind the curve. Europe has even more stringent requirements than the United States, which is demanding 50% EV adoption by 2030. And there are states within the United States, such as New York and California, that have also more stringent requirements than what the federal government is requiring.
Looks like Richard is watching our podcast, one of our social media team members. He's saying, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Richard.
Merry Christmas, Richard, and Happy New Year. All right, so Instagram, DBrown00, DD Brown, do you feel that demand for EVs will stall due to the supply of raw materials for battery manufacturing? Can LiPo batteries be recycled, and if so, what is the degree? And can battery manufacturing keep up with the demand? What is so cool about this recycling effort with these newer types of batteries is that it is almost a closed-loop recycling effort. Like Redwood Materials claims to have a zero waste stream. Fundamentally, what that means is that every bit of stainless steel that entered that building and cobalt and lithium is being rendered back to its base material and recycled and resold to the EV manufacturers. So it's a very clean process. Lead acid batteries, for example, you've got lead, which of course is poisonous, and then you've got acid, which is very damaging in many ways, and then the plastics, which we already have a huge problem with. It looks like companies like Redwood Materials leading the charge with battery recycling is solving this problem for us. So yes, I'm very optimistic about the future of recycling with EVs. Will there be are there supply chain problems? Always, always. But the upside there is, if you're a small manufacturer, you're not going to get the same kind of attention from the vendors as a large company like Tesla. So they tend to be favored when it comes to supply chain problems and issues.
The other thing I was going to mention too, I don't know if you brought it up. I was running the questions over there. Sorry. It's not entirely for sure that we'll be dependent on lithium and variations of lithium batteries anyway, if we do graphene or a number of other things as well, right?
Correct. Exciting new battery technologies emerging. And DC storage will go through a massive upgrade and exponentially improve because of the demand. And that's how the market works. When you have a lot of demand for something, innovation kicks in, and a lot of companies and scientists are looking at better ways to do things.
Yeah, I think there is a chance for a lithium squeeze in the demand sector, but it's going to be more politically motivated, I think, than it is going to be truly material motivated. There's a lot of lithium capability in North America that's not being tapped due to environmental regulation, is what I've heard, and a lot of that is going to end up coming online, I think, before this is all said and done.
You know, one of the things that we were asked earlier is what is the projection for the Cybertruck? And the bit of news that we have that relates to that is there are apparently dozens of Kuka robots that are now being delivered to Giga Texas. Kuka robots are those gigantic red arms that are carrying chunks of a car, whether it's seats or body panels or whatever, that are moving around the production process at Tesla. If you want a good example of that, I recommend you go see a video about Giga Berlin, where a mini drone is actually doing a fly through the factory, and you'll see this little drone is actually flying in between these types of robots, and also presses that are creating molds, body molds. The fact that these are showing up in Texas indicates that the production lines are being completed for the Cybertruck, and the projection by Tesla is that Cybertruck production will be mid-2023.
This is better than what was projected at the beginning of November. There were a lot of outlets, such as Electrek and Inside EVs, that were saying at the beginning of November it might be the end of 2023 before this production could take place. So I think this is going to be very good news for Tesla indeed.
So just to give you an idea of how many Kuka robots are going to Texas, the Texas Gigafactory, these are coming from Germany, and they were sent in 9 different shipments. Each shipment ranges in weight from 7,000 pounds to 27,000 pounds, with anywhere from 3 to 10 robots in each. So we're talking about a lot of robots that are ready to start cranking out this vehicle. All right.
All right. So you guys know we're over 50 minutes now, and we still got some questions here if you want to get those here.
All right.
So from TikTok, user, again, a bunch of numbers here, starting with 999. Would you be interested in doing a franchise? I'll let you answer that one.
We get asked that question constantly. We are not ready to franchise at this point. We are still growing, and staff, there are always staff shortages. So at this point, we cannot get involved in a franchise or scaling operation, opening bricks and mortar in other locations. The business is there, don't get me wrong. If we were open in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, any of the major markets, we would have customers immediately. The problem is the skill people to do the work. We have to home grow our people, and this addresses or gets back to the question earlier. Well, the mechanics should be able to pivot and begin working on EVs. That hasn't been our experience. Not in the independent space.
Not yet. From Wilcox87 on TikTok in Denver. Welcome, Denver. How long do you think it will take for EVs to capture 25% of the U.S. new car market?
The projections that I don't have one, because it's been happening exponentially, and I'm always surprised at how much is really taking place.
I kind of feel the same. It's really hard to project. 2 years ago, EVs were less than 1% of the market. Last year, I think they hit between 1 and 3. The latest that I had read, I believe it was on CNN, was that EVs were potentially going to be as much as 6% of the market this year. We know that in 7 years' time, the U.S. has mandated that EVs make up 50% of the market, but I don't know exactly how quickly it'll happen. I do think it's going to happen fairly quickly, though. The excitement around the EV space is palpable. I saw that as we were going through our new car buying experience as well.
We just got a question. What do we think of Lucid? Well, Lucid is definitely one of the premier companies. There was a lot of concern about Lucid a few weeks ago before that $1.5 billion additional funding came along. They have a viable product. They have stable management. They have a lot of expertise. They have a car that is the ultimate production car. There's a video for those of you that haven't seen it that Haggerty just put out, and they pitted 4 cars against each other. There was a Lucid Sapphire, there was the Tesla Model S Plaid, which was the ultimate, right? Road
Yes,
car. Was. Then we've got the Bugatti Chiron, a $4.2 million car, which you would expect with a dual 8-cylinder engine system would smoke the rest of them. And then we had a Ducati sports bike. And guess what? The Sapphire beat them all. Now, granted, the average commuter is not going to utilize the full power capability of a car like this. But from a passion standpoint, this car definitely fuels a lot of excitement because of that. Now, why is their stock down below $10? It's another mystery. But again, if you're an investing type, these are bargains at this point. In our opinion, and we're not financial experts.
That's right. We're not financial advice. From LinkedIn, J. Craig McCaddy, can you speak about the lack of fast charging stations infrastructure across the U.S., and what is the plan, timeline, and interchangeability between makes and models coming over the next 2 to 5 years?
My personal opinion on that is that when Tesla built their charging system nationwide, they had to do that in order to generate car sales, and it was a huge expense. And of course, they were giving away charging free for the longest time. All of us out here in the business community knew that that wasn't sustainable. It wasn't going to last forever. But the other part of it is they're sitting on a massive cash cow in that they're now, if they're ready to convert to allow other vehicles to use their charging system, it's going to be a massive revenue generator.
By all means, and with the new infrastructure plan passed by the U.S. federal government this year, it seems like there's a lot of infrastructure that is going to be rolled out and built within the next 2 to 5 years. What we hear here in Arizona is that virtually every rest stop on every interstate within the next 2 to 5 years is going to have at least 1 or 2 chargers at it, if not more, depending on the traffic. So I think that there is going to be a tremendous amount of change and improvement in the charging infrastructure within the next 2 to 5 years, in my opinion.
So the demand will be met by expansion.
One other thing, there's 40,000, I just looked up on the website. Tesla has 40,000 superchargers, and they're also testing in Europe, opening those up to other vehicles. So when they do that here in the U.S., that's an additional 40,000, in addition to, I think, the 50,000 chargers that Biden just approved.
I think that's going to do a lot. That while that may meet today's demand, I think that the demand is also going to go up exponentially, and so it's going to continue to be a challenge for a few years.
And of course, other challenges are charging standards. Let's please decide on one charging connector. And of course, that will change as well because we have new technologies coming out. Cable-less charging, inductive coupling charging. So just brace yourself. We're in a highly disruptive period right now where change is that's the byproduct of this level of disruption that we're going through, and the problems will be solved.
Just like with the CHA CHAdeMO or CHA-DEMO charging standard, that's largely going to end up going away in favor of the CCS charging standard. Yet with Tesla potentially going to take its Trident charger and put it out for other cars to use, I think there's a lot of competition still to come for the charging standards.
And you know, the retrofit on these charging stations is not major. It's typically a change of a cable and a connector. unless of course we are limited to only AC charging or DC charging.
That's correct.
All of those are problems that can be solved. Instagram, the Philly Juicer, thank you for all you do. I love your Instagram and the content you guys put out. You're more than welcome. We appreciate our audience as well.
Thank you. And if we can pull up that question from Charles. Charles Jutkins, can you comment on the 2170 versus 4680 repair? Also, current 4680 doesn't have any advantage in watts per kilogram than the 4680.
You know, Sandy Monroe's team did a wonderful job taking apart a 4680 battery pack. Mm-hmm. And they, of course, faced major challenges getting through all that potting compound and trying to figure out what's inside the structural battery pack. What the industry was left with was an understanding that these packs are not serviceable. The jury's out as far as we're concerned until we get a chance to start working on these. Part of what we do, we solve problems like this. Mm-hmm. We're in the independent space. We have to innovate. We have to figure out ways to service things, and we haven't had a chance to do that yet. And you'd be amazed at the miracles that we can work when we are under the gun to try to repair. Well, look at the Tesla Roadsters. Look at what we've been able to do with those. Literally, we save more Tesla Roadsters than anyone on the planet. They come in dead, we put them back on the road, and we're able to repair and rebuild those battery packs to keep them functioning. So until we have some 4680 packs and we're given a chance to work our magic, we're going to reserve judgment on whether these are repairable or not.
DD Brown00 from Instagram asked, what do you feel about the concept of DIY EVs? Obviously, for those that are familiar with electronics, similar to the Factory 5 Kit car program.
You know, we had a customer that contacted us last week. It's the Hall of Flame, which is a fire truck museum here in Phoenix, Arizona. It turns out it's the largest in the world. It's the size of a Home Depot, which is fairly large if you're familiar with Home Depots. And it's full of trucks. One of them goes back to 1725, the oldest known fire truck in the world. Anyway, they're often invited to join parades and, you know, special events and bring one of their vehicles. And what they would like to do is have a conversion done with one of these older fire trucks to electric, so they can run this thing down the parade. And it doesn't have to, you know, it's not rushing to a fire where it's got to do full speed. We're talking about parade level speeds. They asked us, of course, to do the conversion. We told them, you know, we are so busy doing what we do. It would be wonderful. It would be fun. I would love to tackle a project like this to do an EV conversion, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it. So we started looking for companies that can do an EV conversion for this company. And we found one here locally. Their website claims that they do EV conversions. They've done a Volkswagen Bug. They did, I think, a Jeep or something. And we thought, well, there's the answer. None of us have been able to reach this company for over 2 weeks now. So either they're out of business or they've taken a long extended holiday vacation. The point I'm trying to make here is there will be a huge cottage industry of conversion shops that will provide this type of service. And it will even be parts that you can buy for a do-it-yourself effort. But there has to be a package put together that allows a do-it-yourself effort so that the do-it-yourself person doesn't have to do the software portions and all the fabrication. There are parts that are already machined and ready to plug and play into whatever vehicle you're trying to put it into.
Well, and I think you've hit on one of the big challenges for the do-it-yourselfer. The EVs that exist today are largely computers on wheels. Mm-hmm. Who's going to do all of the programming for those computers on wheels if you don't have somebody develop the software and be able to put it into a do-it-yourself type of platform?
Precisely. So anyway, at this point, the Hall of Flame does not yet have an EV conversion solution vendor. If any of you out there have those skills and you'd like us to unite you with this customer, please email us at ev@gruber.com. We're looking for a plug-and-play, off-the-shelf similar to what crate engines used to be for the older cars, the muscle cars and whatever. All right. I have something for the next few, and we'll probably save it because we're running out of time on this podcast, but 30 things that are going to disappear within the next few years. And it was fun to read through this and understand why and the justifications, but I'll give you just a few of those. Antennas.
Mm-hmm.
There's no more need to put antennas on vehicles. We're not really looking for broadcast reception anymore with Bluetooth and all the rest. We actually have one customer that lives off of Lake Michigan in a remote area, and the reception wasn't great, and he had a favorite radio station that that wasn't living up to expectations with his Roadster. So Roadsters do not have any external antennas. He ended up putting an antenna on the back trunk of this Roadster, and it's probably the only Roadster with an antenna on it, right? But yeah, those are going away. In fact, he now realizes that we're going to do some body work on his car, and we're going to close off that antenna hole and put it back to stock.
Okay. You know, we have one last question as we wrap up here for Multifire. With the current recent bitter cold weather, the issues of cold battery not being able to be charged and the range being cut down, is this issue being addressed?
You know, I saw the same thing over the weekend, actually. Kyle Connor with Out of Spec Motoring took a Rivian R1T, I think, or R1S, to some EA, Electrified America charging stations, and it was below zero. And 3 of them apparently didn't work for another customer that was there. He tried 2 of them and finally got one that would work in that extreme cold weather. Apparently there's some issues that are going to need to be resolved. There was another problem where the mounting hook for the Tesla supercharger in extremely cold weather was not holding the connector in properly, and as people left, they tried to hang it and then gave up and let it fall on the ground. Now, of course, it filled up with snow and you know, ice and water, whatever else, and dirt and debris. There are challenges. I'm sure they will solve them. So that's the simple answer. TikTok, Wilcox87, for a 2023 high school graduate, what course of study would you recommend to join your company? I would say get yourself an electronics education. Learn what the components are. Learn how to use test equipment. And that will prepare you for a number of new careers. And then, of course, there's always software, which Mark will probably talk about.
That's right.
Yeah, software is also a great place to go.
Electronics engineering degree from one of the universities around oftentimes does include some software training, and it's getting even more so as time goes on. Here in Arizona, we have places like DeVry University, Arizona State, University of Arizona, that are all good schools and all have good engineering departments or are good engineering schools.
Well, we appreciate everyone joining us for these sessions, and today is Tuesday, so we'll have another one Thursday this week at 8:30 Mountain Standard Time. As always, we appreciate our audience. We love your questions, and you tell us what we need to educate ourselves on and bring to the next podcast.
Yes, thank you very much for your time.
We'll see you Thursday.